before you sit down, in case people missed it, what does that say?
Okay. Yeah, since it's Halloween, I thought I'd come dressed as a first lady who really does care.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's been a while. Welcome
Thank you for being here.
Bienvenido a Miami.
Oh, muchas gracias.
Have you had Cuban coffee?
Have I had?
Cuban coffee.
I've had Cuban coffee. I've had Cuban sandwiches. I've had Cuban friends. I've had Cuban nights out. Cuban everything.
Stop right there.
This is quite a time. You know what's interesting is, I have a lot of people who come to the show and we talk about politics, and a lot of the time, I won't lie, many of the people who come to the Daily Show have political views that match with mine or the audience, but you're in an interesting position because you are a Republican. Are you still a Republican?
Here's the thing. I was a Republican when Donald Trump was a Democrat. I was a Republican when Donald Trump was an independent. And I'm a Republican now that he's pretending to be a Republican, and so many other Republicans are enabling him and allowing him to pretend.
So that presents an interesting dilemma for you and for many Republicans out there, right? Because a day like today...
Seems like Paul Ryan.
Yeah, a day like today is a perfect example. So you have Donald Trump who comes out and says, I want to change the Constitution. I want to say that birthright citizenship is no longer part of the 14th Amendment. And Paul Ryan comes out and says, hey, that's not something that you can do. That's unethical. It's impeachable. And Donald Trump replied, and he said to Paul Ryan, you need to focus on maintaining the House. I'm going to do what the new Republican Party needs to be done. And hold on. That's an interesting space for many people to be in, because it does feel like in some ways Donald Trump is redefining what the Republican Party is all about. What does that mean to you?
Look, I think Donald Trump in a very short time, in less than 2 years, has redefined the Republican Party. He has redefined the presidency. It is now a place that is used to bully other Americans. It is a place that is used to lie and spread fear. And he has changed America. He has changed the country. He has polarized us in a way that's much greater than we were already.
Right.
He has fabricated culture wars. He has sown discord. And he's handed the keys to the kingdom to the Russians.
So...
But I grew up, to answer your question, look, I grew up in a Republican Party, and many of us here in Miami understand this, where it was, we tried to be more inclusive, tried to have a bigger tent. Dinosaurs were not roaming the earth when George W. Bush got 44% of the Hispanic vote. That was way before they were doing things like separating children at the border and putting them in little pens.
If you look at the situation that America's in now, in many ways you see Donald Trump and his effect mirrored in politics on a local level. For many Republican politicians, it has now become a clear choice. Either you are with Donald Trump or you have to see your way out of the Republican Party. And people like Jeff Flake have chosen that. People like Paul Ryan are saying, like, I'm out of the game. And then you have people like politicians locally like DeSantis who have run specifically on a message of, I am everything that Trump embodies. Are you seeing that connecting with people?
Certainly so in primaries. Look, Ron DeSantis is Donald Trump's parasitic twin. But for Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis would not have won the Republican primary.
Right.
And even after the primary, instead of distancing himself from Trump, as for example Rick Scott has done, who's treating him like a Zika mosquito, Ron DeSantis embraces him. Donald Trump is going to be rallying for Ron DeSantis in Florida today and again before the elections. And so he's modeled himself as a mini Trump. He is now saying that he too agrees with repealing the 14th Amendment through executive order, which is ridiculous and unconstitutional. And that's just the way he's playing it. Look, Donald Trump had so much to do on both sides in deciding primaries. Often the ones who won in Republican primaries were the ones who embraced him the most, and the ones who won in Democratic primaries were the ones who opposed him and confronted him the most. And, unfortunately, so many of the Republicans who tried to stand up to Trump, who tried to rebuke him when he merited it, are either retiring, like Flake, have lost elections, or have died. And so you are left with a Republican Party that is more and more like Trump and that depends on him and knows him more. If Ron DeSantis wins in Florida, he owes it to Donald Trump. He is indebted to Donald Trump. At that point, Donald Trump owns the guy.
But then here's a question I have for you as a Republican who says you've been a Republican your whole life. We always speak about it as if Donald Trump operates in isolation, as if politicians operate in isolation, but somebody has to vote for them. True. And if Republican voters are voting for these people and Republicans are choosing people who go with Trump, Republicans are choosing to oust people like Jeff Flake, choosing to oust people who stand up to Donald Trump, then do you think that maybe there was a side of the Republican Party that either you were not seeing or you were choosing to not see?
Both. Both. And look, there were 15, I think two things happened. I think you're right. I think there was a shift in the base and a side of it that many of us didn't see, including the 15 other Republicans who ran for the Republican primary, people like Jeb Bush, people like John Kasich. But I also think Trump brought out a different type of people, a different class of people. He brought out people who had not been engaged in politics before, who had not been motivated to vote.
Well, we saw that with the mail bomber, funny enough. People said he wasn't political, and then Donald Trump ignited something in him.
So look, I think...
That was not intended. That was not, sorry. Excuse the pun.
You know, like him or not, I think he has awoken something in America on both sides. I think, he has brought out people on one side, but on the other, on the Democratic side, we're also seeing people more engaged. We're seeing candidates running for the first time. We're seeing more LGBTQ, people of color, women running as candidates because they got energized, because they got enraged, and because they decided to be part of the process. I think you owe the Me Too movement in large part to Donald Trump and women who said, because women were silent and didn't talk about the Donald Trump issues before, we ended up with him as president, and that ignited a frustration and anger in women that motivated them to speak up and not remain silent and, and stick together in numbers.
So when you look at, let's just say, Florida itself, let's look at the governor's race. You look at a race between Andrew Gilliam, Ron DeSantis, and you see Gilliam exciting people in a different way. You see people who are engaged with him, not just on policy, but also in the way that he actually, I guess, conveys his message. When you look at that race as a Republican in Miami, what do you make of it?
Look, for me, I'm a centrist. I'm a moderate Republican, I'm a centrist. And so when I look at that race, on the one hand, I've got Ron DeSantis, who is increasingly, or forget increasingly, he's not an option. And on the other hand, I've got Andrew Gilliam, who is a progressive Democrat, who is much further to the left than I am on policy issues. I had not met him before. I met him a couple of days ago, and I gotta tell you something. Part of the reason that guy is awakening something is because he's likable. I had forgotten what it was like to have a likable person running in Florida. He could charm a cat out of a tree. He actually likes people. He's relatable. He tells jokes. He smiles. He inspires. He's working through a message of unity and being positive. And so, look, I think it's a huge contrast that Florida voters have to choose from. They're going to have to choose from a message of fear and scare tactics. Like, for example, one of the things that's got me really upset in the last few days is, and I know there's somebody here from Venezuela, Donald Trump is out there saying that Andrew Gilliam, and by the way, he's also saying it about Beto O'Rourke in Texas, but he's saying that Andrew Gilliam is going to turn Florida into Venezuela.
Right.
People are dying in Venezuela. It is ruled by a murderous dictator who beats, kills, jails, harasses his opponents, who expropriates property. There is no food in Venezuela. There is no medicine in Venezuela. People are starving. It is a dictatorship. So to incite that level of fear in people and to cheapen the trauma of the Venezuelan exiles who live here in Florida, the Nicaraguan exiles, the Cuban exiles who have actually fled communism, who have suffered under those systems by casually and cavalierly saying Andrew Gilliam is going to turn Florida into Venezuela. Well, if he does, we got a real problem. Because you know what? We got a Republican legislature in Florida. We got a conservative Supreme Court in Florida. We've got checks and balances in Florida. That is not going to happen. And I hope Florida voters reject a campaign of fear-mongering and scare tactics. We can't fall for that again.
Thank you so much for being on the show again.
Thank you.
Always wonderful having you. Ana Navarro, everybody.